Hey friends, before we get started, I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe, like, and leave a comment. It would help the video out a lot, and it's an easy thing for you to do but means a lot to us. Thanks in advance.
So one time we had a relative from the south stay with us. My uncle came for a month on a work trip, and he decided to take the opportunity to meet up with us. With family members he had never seen, he completely changed my views on the place where I live. He pointed out things I had never noticed before. My uncle had a tough time getting up in the mornings. He used to say it was still nighttime. His stories about his hometown sounded like fairy tales to me, and the photos he showed were like colorful pictures. In his garden, he grew peaches, apricots, and pomegranates. My uncle fished almost year-round from his motorboat, and if he felt like it, he would camp out in a tent. Meanwhile, my relative was amazed by what we take for granted. "How do you live like this?" he asked. In the dark and eternal cold, I'd never really thought about living in such harsh conditions. For me, it was just the way things were. Summer lasted 3 weeks a year, and the rest of the time it was either chilly or downright freezing. As far back as I can remember, I trudged through the deep freeze to get to my first class, never running into anyone along the way. You just keep walking and walking until you finally reach school. There are times when it feels like it's always night, and blizzards can hit so hard that they can cover the road to the next town in just an hour, leaving it unplowed for 2 weeks. I always knew this, but I could never quite imagine that there were people living somewhere else. People live differently up here. Who even thought about settling in the deep north? Did our ancestors really come to this icy wasteland in search of new lands, and someone just said, "This is great, let's stay"? But after meeting my uncle, I didn't get fired up about the idea of moving south. It all seemed so unrealistic. Our lives here are pretty much mapped out. After finishing school, I went to a technical college for oil. Everyone goes there. For me, not much changed. I still went to class in the morning, just made some new friends along the way. I used to hang out with Lev. We lived on the same street, and I often visited him. Lev had his own apartment. We both dreamed of finding girlfriends to make our time together more fun, but we had no luck meeting anyone. So we just passed the time playing online for about 6 hours a day. What else was there to do? Around that time, there was a story going around about a woman who had died. The details sounded like a horror story meant to scare kids. A schoolgirl discovered the body. It was not only completely drained of blood, but also missing all its internal organs. A little girl had to see her mom's mutilated body, which was just awful. I thought all these rumors were exaggerated, but then I heard even crazier details. My friend mentioned that last week they found another dead kid, completely drained of blood, missing eyes and a tongue. What do you think happened to him? I didn't believe everything people were saying and voiced my doubts. We didn't see anything. It all seemed so ridiculous. They could have died from anything, and the bodies could have been chewed on by dogs or birds. Eyes, and then everything else is just gossip. To make it scarier, if you're hinting that wolves tore them apart, I don't buy it. They don't even come into the village, so suddenly they're roaming the city? Nope, that's not wolves, and they're not dogs or birds either. Lev put my logic to the test. They found both bodies in the stairwells, completely gutted. Animals can't do that. He really got me interested, so I asked if he was suggesting it was a maniac. "I'm not suggesting anything," Lev replied. "Just imagine, they might make a documentary about our town. The consumer of eternal frost made me cynical with the dull and boring life around here, and it had me dreaming about such horrors." But this isn't just some maniac. Lev said it like he knew something. "Didn't they scare you as a kid with those evil demons that hunt people?" You know, vampires or whatever? Nah, not vampires. Just demons from the legends of the native people. They seem to attack people, drain all their blood, and either eat their insides or just take them. It's like they can swap out their hearts and other organs, so they live forever. Kind of like vampires, right? Lev was really fed up with me joking about vampires. He just didn't get that I was messing with him, and it made him mad. My friend thought that besides humans, there could be another ancient race living alongside us. He believed Neanderthals might still be around, and that there could be other creatures better suited to the cold, who don't just sleep in the ice for decades, but come out sometimes to feed. Our ancestors understood the local nature well. They weren't dumb enough to mistake a predator for some evil forces. They knew there was something scarier than wolves lurking beyond the settlements, and they were afraid of it. I used to think of them as evil spirits. I figured only kids or old folks believe in that stuff, but I just laughed because I had to head home. How many times had I walked through the dark, snowy streets without a care? My town always felt like the safest place. Bright streetlights, warm windows, a little island of light in a sea of shadows and relentless cold. I didn't want to believe there could be any real evil here. But now, I found myself looking over my shoulder and carefully making my way into the building, then hurrying up the stairs like a kid. Honestly, things stopped feeling like just rumors pretty quickly. The nightmare got so close that Lev and I could feel it and see it for ourselves. A police jeep pulled up to our street, and as soon as we saw the flashing lights through the window, we knew something serious had happened. It's not often that the cops show up in our chilly neighborhood. I had never seen them here before. My friend and I got dressed and ran out to find out what was going on. The car was parked by the last house, blocking the driveway, with red and blue lights flashing all over the place. There was an officer with a double chin standing guard. "Hey, you guys can't hang out here and smoke your e-cigs," the cop said, but he wasn't trying to kick us out. It seemed like he didn't want to be alone over there by the murder scene. "You guys don't need to know about that," he snapped, but holding his tongue wasn't really his style, and he quickly added, "Anyway, Lev, you've really crossed the line. Can we just watch until your buddies show up?" I looked at my friend like he was losing it. "What is this, a circus or something?" The cop got mad. "Well, if you're brave enough, go ahead and look." Lev walked around the SUV. I peeked into the stairwell, and the cop and I were waiting for his reaction. Damn! Something had changed in my friend's eyes. He was in shock. The officer took a deep breath and let out a thick cloud of smoke. I thought I was ready and decided to take a look too, but I wasn't prepared for what I saw. On the steps lay two human bodies, men completely naked, sliced open from throat to groin, no blood, just hollowed out, clean down to the ribs and spine. Their faces looked like latex masks with hollow eye sockets. Their lips were turned inside out, mouths wide open, and no tongues. What I saw shook me more than anything ever had. I was waiting for the guard, and Lev was staring at my face. I wanted to talk to them, show some emotion, but I just couldn't. My facial muscles wouldn't cooperate. Right away, two guys were butchered. No animal would do that, but a human could. A maniac from the frozen depths. I couldn't picture him anymore. My imagination conjured up monsters from my friend Lev's stories. Lev didn't scold me or bring up my mockery. That evening, we realized that trouble had come to our homes, and we shouldn't be wandering the streets or showing ourselves in the building. But where could I go? I was lucky I noticed. They showed up before they could hide in my house. I was lucky I didn't step outside a minute later. They moved like a blizzard, like the wind on the ground, weaving and swaying. I could barely keep track of them. Were there 4 or 5? Thin, identical figures with shiny, bare heads, dressed in dark robes. You don't see folks dressed like that so casually in the summer. They slipped into the entrance in a neat line, and I managed to catch the door before it closed. But no, there was nothing in front of me. Just an empty hallway. Where did those bald-headed freaks in dark rags go? They disappeared like ghosts, I thought, until I looked up. They were hanging from the ceiling, heads down, their clawed feet gripping the cracks in the plaster. I was lucky I didn't step over the threshold. They were waiting for me, several pairs of black eyes staring. Their faces looked human, but their eyes were completely black, bottomless. I couldn't go home. Outside, it was freezing cold. I called Lev and told him they're hanging out in my building. My friend advised me to get to him as fast as I could. I warned my mom over the phone. She stayed inside the apartment and tried to pass the same message to the neighbors. It's lucky, no one else survived the encounter with them except for you. I wish I could see them too. Lev either wasn't really jealous or was just trying to calm me down. I didn't feel even a hint of excitement. I knew I'd never forget those quiet eyes. They wanted to kill me and gut me that night, but they ended up with someone else. He didn't even live in our building. He came over to see his girlfriend. The guy left his car in the parking lot, but he never made it up to her. They found him on the first floor, or rather, what was left of him. He was left as nothing but an empty shell, devoid of blood and guts, with clothes torn to shreds. That was the fate that awaited me, but I noticed the danger just in time and let him take his turn at death. It was awful. Leo and I decided we had to warn as many people as we could. We created an anonymous channel where we shared all the information we had. Even when we gained a few hundred followers and the word spread all over the city, more and more victims kept popping up. Empty bodies found in the stairwells of one neighborhood and then another. Nobody knew where to expect trouble this time. Residents from different streets were writing about it. Some talked about strange people gliding through the twilight like shadows, while others claimed to have seen huge cocoons made of rags on the ceiling of the stairwell. They couldn't be caught or killed. After hearing about the new empty body, I hoped it would be the last case. I wanted to believe they would get tired and go back to the frost to sleep for a decade, as my friend said. Not a week went by without a new victim, and everyone knew it. After sunset, many people stopped walking alone. I was also scared of being alone and accidentally overstepped my welcome. He seemed tired of my constant presence, and after a long silence, he finally asked, "Hey, aren't they waiting for you at home?" I had to admit he was right. I had been hanging around too long, running back home at night through the snow, lingering at the entrance, afraid to go up to my floor, feeling like my heart was about to jump out of my chest. Now, when my friend invited me over, I didn't overstay my welcome and left early. The days were getting shorter, and it was time for me to get used to it. I was walking in the dark, hoping I'd get lucky enough to meet the mystical soul of Gubov. From what we've seen, they rarely show up on the same street twice. As I was getting ready for another sprint home, my friend locked the door behind me, and I heard someone downstairs slam a door shut. It was a brisk sound, like someone shaking off snow from their shoes, which was oddly comforting. I headed down the stairs, expecting to see someone and ready to say hi, but then I heard a noise like a person getting buried under snow, and they screamed out loud, unable to move any further down. I saw some guys tearing clothes off a guy while greedily slurping away, and I don't even know why I looked over there. I guess I was hoping it wasn't what I thought. A few bald heads were stuck to the guy's naked body. One of them was slicing into his chest with a sharp claw like a scalpel. while the others were licking up and swallowing his blood. They took just a minute to kill him, rip his clothes off, and cut open his body without spilling a single drop of blood on the floor. What the hell were they? I was standing closer than I should have been, peeking out from behind the railing, and the guy doing the cutting suddenly looked up while his disgusting buddies were busy feasting. He was kneeling at the feet of the dead guy, untangling his cloak. He looked kind of like a person, but his skin was tough, like a shiny gold surface, reflecting the lamplight. His chest reminded me of a shell or the folded wings of a scarab beetle. There was a slit running from his throat down through his torso. After shedding his clothes, the guy with the polished skin grabbed the edges of the slit and popped open the hard plates on his chest. Inside, a chaotic jumble of all sorts of organs was writhing, and a bunch of lungs were inflating. The creature's chest was pulsating, its intestines and stomach moving. The creature's chest was pulsating, its intestines and stomach moving. It reached into the dead body and pulled out the heart, then stuffed that foreign organ into its own chest, which immediately started to contract. I stood there, frozen, trying to make myself move back before they noticed me. Fighting against my stiff muscles, I managed to pull my leg back. They heard me, just a rustle. The creature with dark eyes said something to the others in its harsh language. They all looked up, and for just a few seconds, we stared at each other, every moment feeling like an eternity. It felt like it went on forever. I ran upstairs, hit the door, and yelled, "Leoha, open up! Let me in!" I could hear them coming behind me. I banged on the apartment door, imagining my friend sitting at his computer, headphones on, totally into his game. He wouldn't hear me, and they'd grab me and gut me. Death was breathing down my neck. Leoha opened the door, took a look over my shoulder, and froze in terror. I got swept into the apartment like a gust of wind. I managed to turn around and slam the door shut. "It's them," I said to my friend. "Am I right? It's them." "What was that about?" he asked. "He knows." I saw everything and prayed that the killer wouldn't slip into the locked apartment. I asked God to just make them leave, but those evil beings were still outside the door. Their chatter sounded like annoying bird tweets. Leoha regretted letting me in. He was so scared he couldn't hide it. "Why did you come back?" the guy asked. "You brought them to me." He meant it would have been better if I had just been killed there. I thought we were best friends. Outside, it was dark, and dawn was still a long way off. The first hit was like the roar of an avalanche. A city appeared on the door, and it's not a vampire, and I need an invitation to get in. They were trying to break down the doors, so we hid, quickly, in the hallway. There was a door that wasn't locked. I didn't think, just jumped and pulled myself up. The butchers burst into the apartment like a storm, scattered through the rooms, and in the blink of an eye, they rushed back into the entrance. The last scream echoed off the walls and faded away. I lay on the shelf among crumpled boxes, shaking and crying. My friend Leoha didn't have time to hide. They took him with them. I put him in harm's way, and it's true. I wish they had just taken me and gutted me, instead of having to live with what I've done.